And do you see that as a conversation that people have, or so how do you?
Great question. It's often where it starts. So the feeling to me is people have fear about hurting anyone, right? So, and that fear often stops the conversation about living donor transplant. So I think what we need to do is honor that fear is valid, but then also give the objective level of risk in terms of what would be the risks, what are the protections that happen for donors, are you okay with this level of risk? Obviously there's transplants happening all the time, so we're having those conversations. The education covers that, and it makes sure that it isn't like living donation is right for everybody.
So there's the education to the donor.
We have education for both. Yes, exactly.
So how do you address some of the fears that the donors might have? Someone wants. So how do you address? So what are some? Well, maybe this is the question. What are some of the potential fears that a kidney donor might have, and how do you address those?
How do we address this? Okay, interesting. So that's been the story of my life, so I'm happy to answer this. So basically the thought is anybody who has questions about any health condition, they're all valid, right? It's not like we're gonna say, don't worry about that fear. So what we're doing is, for example, in the storytelling project, they answer the question. So somebody said, why would you allow your child to donate to you? Okay, there's a lot of parents that don't wanna allow their children to be in any harm's way. It's totally understandable. So to me, I have my patients who are thinking about this, who've had their child offer, listen to other people who were in that situation. I also go over what the risks are. So it's really, to me, a sense of honoring where people are and addressing the concerns as objectively and respectfully as possible to allow them to make an informed decision.
What are some of those concerns?
What are the concerns that people have? Okay, so people are afraid they're gonna die undergoing surgery. They're afraid they're gonna harm their loved one. They're afraid that it'll cost too much. They're afraid that the donors are afraid that their loved one is going to die before they're able to help. So if you think about this, it's very much a dual decision. So all these things are coming up in a space of a medical encounter. Family members and friends are worried that their loved ones are going to die, and they don't actually sometimes know which options would help them live longer. So what I would say is this has been it's a really complex conversation of a family, of a group of friends. It's not just a patient by themselves. And so we try to have information that can go to anybody so everyone can learn.
Thank you. Great presentation, very impactful and packed full of a lot of great information. I'd like to kind of revisit the ask.
Sure.
So 350,000, 3 years. I know you have that timeline slide of, that slide. Use noun project, by the way. I think a lot of the icons are fantastic use of it. Anyways, so I'd like to revisit kind of beyond the 3 years.
Sure.
And so you've done a lot of the building of the program, designing of the program, the tools, the resources. What happens next after 3 years?
So here's what I've seen. I believe that use of education needs to be created within the systems that are happening and within the communities of people who say this is valuable or I don't like this part. So what I do often is I bring what I have our best practices of education that are honoring patients in early stages of learning, donors who are in early stages of learning, all the way up to somebody who's like, I'm ready for a transplant tomorrow. And we build all of these. And then we work with our community partners, our patient and donor groups, and then we work with our safety net partners to say, okay, is any of this helpful for you? How exactly could this be woven into your clinical care? And if they say no, it needs to be supplementary. So to give you an example, Rigo is my coach for this program, and he let me come in and meet with his CMO, who's a nephrologist, about all of the care at Venice Family Clinic. And she was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. We could connect it with our diabetes education. So we have those established, so we can now add transplant as one of the things you need to know if you're diabetic. So I wouldn't have ever thought of that. So it's really a sense for me of finding the right partners, and I'm open to any group that has kidney patient access. I'd love to talk to you. But it's like, how do we weave these in to supplement what you're doing, or even if you don't have something happening, to establish a new foundation. I'm open. I tested in Kaiser, I've tested it in transplant centers, it's been a lot of things. It's fun. There's different answers to different places.
So the funding beyond the 3 years and $350,000 would be from those established partnerships
I think so, yes. I also think this is something that if we could figure out how best to do this in the safety net, we could then write for large NIH type grants where it's like, we're gonna figure this out for all 7,000. We're gonna do coordinated care methodology. Yeah, so I think this is figuring that out. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I thought it was very moving and very clear what the cost savings would be. So based on this slide, and I think my question is twofold, but what I'm hearing from your presentation, that it is mostly an education campaign kind of presentation,
Education.
and yet there are many kind of components to ask. So my first question is just the pre-work on how you like how did you think about the scale, like how big or small, or like given that you have so many partners, what made you think to do it that large or do it in that scale or not in that scale? And then the other is, if you were to focus really on what the need is right now, is it really the education piece, or is it multiple aspects or one aspect of this that's
I
really
think that's a
important?
great question. Okay, so what I would say right now is what is so in safety nets regarding educating kidney patients and referring them for transplants that has only 3 living donor transplants happen? There's a mystery there, right? A black box. The biggest and highest use of these funds to me as your scientist / educator is we figure out what is happening between 7,000 and 3. Okay, that's the lever that can move the needle, right? Now, do I think that in talking to my partners, they are saying we need more education, providers need education, we need education, we need to debunk, we need to Drano the pipeline somewhere, but we're not exactly clear. So that's been the feedback back in the work to get to this point. So the feeling to me right now is the mapping. I'd say the costs right now are going to the mapping. Let's make sure this is clear to you. We need to see what's happening between here and there. We need to know how many people we know, did they ever go forward for transplant? Were they educated? Did they get referred? Did they rule it out after an informed choice? We need to see what's going on. We need to see if their transplant center received them. Did something drop out in the first evaluation that they had to do a test and they never came back? We need to see the clinical process and where it breaks down. No judgment of anybody, just like where are we losing patients? Then after that's known and the partnership is saying this is what we think is going on, then we need to say what of these resources that we already have could we develop in Spanish and in English, and then we can embed them in the care processes that we have or even modify them. So that's the work we would do in the 3 years. So to me, there's a lot of what's so to happen at the beginning, and then we'd move into design, and then we'd move into the pilot. And going into the point of what's the pilot to me is working within the centers to be empowered. The funds are actually going to the centers. My feeling is that it shouldn't be going to me, the researcher, it should be going into the centers to build something sustainable. We need to see what that costs. We need to see, the print information or are we doing something on the internet, or are we showing it in screens in the waiting room? All of those decisions have to be made. So that's the joy of planning a pilot and testing it in the field, and then ultimately seeing if that actually resulted in movement towards transplant.
Thank you, Dr. Waterman. Great presentation. So, can anyone donate at any point in their lives?
Not everybody. People up to about 65 in terms of an age range. People can't have any risk factors for having kidney failure themselves. So no
grandma would not be.
Exactly. Your family who has diabetes and hypertension, yes, those people would all be ruled out, yes.
Okay. But age is
Age
a
is
factor.
okay. Health. It's a lot about health and no risk factors that if somebody gives one of their kidneys away, the other one would cause any problems.
Okay, so I understand. So if I have a healthy grandparent and they're 70, they can give.
If they're 65, they can give at UCLA.
Okay.
But healthy, good. And if your grandparent is running marathons at 70, they probably can.
Because I want to, so I agree with Christine that I think you really are talking about an awareness campaign here. So for me, it's not so much the 7,000 to the 3, it's the 7,000 to the 4 million, or I don't know how many, what the population is that you're targeting. So for me, are we raising that awareness, especially on what does it mean to be a donor? What are obviously the benefits and the risks? Did you give consideration to a partnership with media, with, how do you elevate
So
the
great,
awareness?
thank you so much for asking, yeah, and I love where you're going. I actually moved from St. Louis, Missouri to LA because I felt that we needed to change the public conversation about transplant. Like currently the way you learn most about transplant is on shows like Grey's Anatomy, right? So, all my hard work, Grey's Anatomy's winning in terms of educational change, right? So, but the thing that I would say about the storytelling project that's been really exciting is it offers the opportunity to get real stories, to clip them into media messages that can then, in different languages in an instant, and then get those into markets that can hear people that you just heard that are very moving talk about this. So that's definitely a direction that we could go. And we're working with places like Donate a Life Hollywood, which is about working with the writers on shows like Grey's Anatomy too, with these kind of stories.
Have you thought about faith-based organizations?
We have. You know what I love about this? The storytelling campaign is really, really great because what happens is people naturally share about where they're coming from as a donor, that this has a faith-based or a service-based place. And we've connected them all, and it's this feeling of this, by capturing the beautiful stories of this field, things could be crafted and cultivated to honor all of the places where messaging needs to be. And it'd be really fun to do that.
Just to piggyback on that, I do agree. I think it's changing the narrative, I think is what you're getting at. So I, like what Mario had said, I completely agree, piggybacking on who's already doing this work at the national level and local level. There's associations, kidney associations, things like that. Personally, I know since you have mentioned some who may qualify as donors, targeting the younger generation, Selena Gomez, she just had a kidney transplant, and I think she was very vocal about it. So you're already tapping into the Hollywood arena, perhaps having a spokesperson or a champion, so that they could relate to the younger millennial crowd, 30s, 40s, things like that, or 20s to 40s would also be important. But yeah, I'm seeing this more definitely as like an education awareness and kind of like not necessarily the patients, but exactly that 4 million other potential donors.
I do want to qualify something. There's 2 sources of donors, and you're naming the second, which is great, which is that someone who didn't know they could ever be a donor and they met Selena Gomez or heard her story and were moved, and now they want to donate.